Ever wonder why we actually aerate grain? I mean, really think about it. The answer is way more fascinating than you'd probably guess. It's not just about, blowing some air around. It's about understanding the biology of what you just harvested. So let's get into it. Okay, so what if I told you that every single one of those kernels in your bin is alive? Yeah, it's not just a pile of stuff. It's a collection of living, breathing organisms. And understanding that one kind of surprising truth, well, that's the absolute key to storing grain successfully. It's the whole reason aeration even exists, and it's why getting it right is so incredibly important. Just think about it like this. Every kernel of grain is basically a seed that's hibernating. It's just sleeping, but it's a complete living thing. If you gave it some soil, some water, a little warmth, boom, it would sprout and grow into a whole new plant. It's all in there, just waiting. Now, because that grain is alive, it does what living things do. It respires, it breathes. And just like us, as a byproduct of, staying alive, it lets off moisture and it creates heat. And guess what? Those two things, heat and moisture, are the absolute worst enemies when it comes to storing grain safely. And that leads us to this crucial point. Once that grain is in the silo, you can't improve it. The condition it was in at harvest is the absolute best it will ever be. From that point on, the name of the game is 100% preservation. You're just trying to stop the grain's own biology from creating an environment that will ruin it. So, if we're playing defense, who are the bad guys? What are the biggest threats we're up against inside that bin? Well, there are a few key enemies you're always fighting to protect your investment. And here they are. The main villains are heat and moisture, which, remember, the grain is making all by itself. And what do heat and moisture do? They roll out the red carpet for their nasty little friends, mold, fungi, and insects. See, these aren't four separate problems. It's a chain reaction. If you can control the first two, you stop the others dead in their tracks. And take a look at this chart. It lays it all out perfectly. You see those red areas? That is the danger zone. As the temperature climbs and the moisture goes up, you're basically building a paradise for mold and bugs to thrive in. Your whole job is to keep your grain way, way out of that zone. Just how big of a difference does it make? Honestly, it's staggering. If your grain gets hot and moist, if it gets into that red zone, you could be looking at total spoilage in as little as 10 days. 10 days! But get it cool and dry, and you can stretch that safe storage time to thousands of days. The financial stakes here are just massive. So how do we fight back? How do we stop these enemies and protect our harvest? Well, this is where our hero enters the story. That aeration fan is your single most important weapon in this whole battle. Without aeration, all that heat and moisture just sits there. It builds up in these little pockets. You get hot spots that basically turn into incubators for mold and bugs. But with aeration, the goal is equalization. You're moving air through the entire pile to create one uniform, stable, and most importantly, cool and dry environment from the floor to the ceiling. But here's the thing. It's not just about randomly blowing air in there. It's a strategic process. It's about creating and controlling something called an aeration front. Here's how that works. When you flip on the fans, you're not instantly cooling the whole silo. It's not like that. Instead, what you're doing is creating a front. Think of it like a wave of cool, dry air that starts right down at the bottom where the air comes in. And then that wave starts to move. It begins this slow, steady march upward through all of the grain. And as it moves, it's literally pushing all that old, warm, moist air up and out ahead of it. It's kind of like a piston, displacing all the bad air with good air, just one layer at a time. Now, the cycle is only finished when that front has moved all the way through the grain and finally exits through the vents at the very top of the silo. Now, and only now, is the whole grain mass conditioned and safe. Everything is at the same temperature. Okay, now for what is probably the single most important rule of aeration. I mean it. Never, ever, ever stop a cycle halfway through. So why is this such a huge deal? Well, if you stop that fan before the front gets all the way out the top, you've just created an absolute disaster. You'll have a layer of cool grain on the bottom and a layer of warm, moist grain on the top. And right at that border where they meet, the warm, moist air is going to hit the cool grain and cause condensation. It's just like a cold glass of water on a hot summer day. You have literally just manufactured a super high moisture layer, which is the perfect storm for spoilage. You have to run the cycle all the way to the end. So, Knowing how it all works is half the battle. The other half is just avoiding some simple, common mistakes that can completely sabotage your aeration strategy before you even flip the switch. Here are the big three. First, clean your silo. I mean, really clean it. Old grain is just an open invitation for insects to come and party. Second, you gotta manage your fines. That's all the dust and the little broken bits. They can really clog up the airflow. They love to collect in the center, so use a grain spreader to distribute them evenly. And third, and this is a big one, don't overfill the silo. That air needs somewhere to escape. If you pile the grain right up to the roof, you're choking the exhaust vents, and that aeration front has nowhere to go. So it all comes back to that first idea, doesn't it? Your grain is alive, and aeration is its life support. So the real question you have to ask yourself is this: are you giving your harvest the air it actually needs to survive?